Good afternoon, Brain Warriors. So I'm here today. We talked yesterday about sheep, sheepdogs, and wolves in regards to your health. I'm so excited about our new book, The Brain Warrior's Way. I just got to look at myself. I'm just got done working out, so you'll have to excuse me being all sweaty. But I always say make your life work for you, right? So this is me making it work for me. But it's been so interesting. I've been getting so many messages from you guys on things not related to food. And I think it's amazing because so many people are making the connection between what they're eating and emotions. And what I love about this new book, The Brain Warrior's Way, is that we really cover everything. It's mastery over your brain and body. So it's mindset. We cover mindset a lot. Assessment, sustenance, which is your food, your training, your essence, which is pain to purpose. And that's a lot of what we've been seeing is people really tapping into what can they do to improve themselves, and they're making that connection to their physical health. And it's, believe it or not, there's a big connection, and it's scientific. It's not hocus pocus or anything like that. There's a lot of science behind it. So I want to touch on that today. So I'm only going to touch on 5 of the major aspects of what happens when you don't forgive people. Because I don't know about you, but this has actually been sort of a stumbling block in my life in the past. Is having difficulty sometimes forgiving because I'm very justice oriented. So it's like if someone does something, they need to pay for it. But see what happens when you refuse to forgive. It's funny when you think about forgiveness. It's amazing that almost every major religion focuses on the need to forgive, right? And it's you got to kind of wonder why. Why is it so important? Why do all these religions think it's so important for you to forgive? And it's not just because of the other person. It turns out, I think that there's a big connection that it affects you. And it turns out to be true scientifically. So just a few of the things that happen when you don't forgive. It affects your pain. Okay, so you actually feel more pain. You don't heal because it increases stress hormones. It affects your relationships. We know that. That's pretty obvious. Your self-esteem and your moods. So it increases depression, anxiety, and all sorts of things. And oh, by the way, it also affects your decision making because as you increase those negative chemicals, those stress hormones, it actually affects your ability to make good decisions. So while you think the other person deserves your wrath, it's you that's being hurt. So you didn't just get hurt once by that person. You're allowing them to continue hurting you if you refuse to learn how to forgive. Now, I'm not oversimplifying this. I know how hard it is sometimes to forgive people, especially for certain injustices that seem really heinous, especially towards children, or I'm not going to get into that. I know that there are some injustices that seem too big. So I want to just touch on that. I actually have chosen a couple mentors in my life just because my life as a child was pretty chaotic and there were some big challenges. And one of my mentors I chose is a woman who I think is phenomenal. Her daughter was killed by a drunk driver. And rather than letting it make her angry and bitter, she has become one of the most amazing people on the planet that I know. And I choose people like that because I know that that's a problem for me. So, you might want to think about doing the same thing. Find people who support your weaknesses. That's one thing I've done. But I want to talk about the science right now of forgiveness because it turns out there are a lot of people out there studying this science of forgiveness. We've all heard the saying, if you don't forgive people, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And it turns out that that's kind of true. So if you haven't heard that, it's actually a really important thing to know. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So there's this very famous burn doctor from Tulane. And he actually noticed that his patients that would come in that were severely burned, most of them were very angry. They had a ton of anger. You can imagine. They had a ton of anger. Often it was towards someone else if it was, some sort of a nasty incident that happened. But quite often it was toward themselves over something stupid that had happened. So he noticed that the angrier they were, it was like it correlated. The worse that their healing was, they wouldn't heal. And so he started studying hypnosis. And when he could put patients into a hypnotic trance, and he would literally talk to them and give the suggestion of they would cool themselves and let their anger go. They would cool their anger. What he noticed is they began to heal, and they would heal significantly faster and better. And so, but a lot of them would say, but I deserve to be angry at that person, or I'm entitled to my anger. And so he never diminished that. And what he would say is, I know you're entitled to be angry, but for now, just for now, I'm asking you to abandon your entitlement. And I thought that was so powerful. So I'm just asking you to abandon your entitlement. And I just thought that was incredibly powerful. And then there's another doctor, Dr. Luskin from Stanford, and he studies forgiveness, the science of forgiveness and the power of forgiveness. And they've studied what happens with stress hormones when someone doesn't forgive versus when they actually teach forgiveness. And these people are teaching forgiveness for very, very terrible things that have happened to people. So your stress hormones go up dramatically, and we know that. So what he teaches people, one significant thing that he teaches people that I took away from it was, instead of focusing on the victim part of what was done to you, instead of saying that person did this to me, or that person is responsible for this, for what happened to me and how I feel, he recommends focusing on accountability for the actions. So focus on the accountability for what the person did, but not what they did to you. So their actions, but don't let them have the power over you. So just stay focused on the actions. And that seems to actually help a lot. And so I don't know if that helps at all, but I know that this is complicated because, sometimes justice and forgiveness do clash. There are some things that just are really big, and that's where we need support and a lot of it, including things like a justice system that helps us in order to be able to put things to bed, because there are times we have to figure out how to be bigger than ourselves, and we have to have people around us that support that. But it doesn't mean, there is a difference between, how do I say this? There's a difference between reconciliation at times and forgiveness. It doesn't always mean you need to reconcile, so you have to learn the difference between reconciling or knowing when you should and should not, and also doesn't mean you'll never suffer. Sorry, I lost you for a second. My friend who lost her daughter in a drunk driving accident, I'm sure she still suffers at times. But learning the difference between forgiveness and suffering. And also, it doesn't mean you have to condone certain actions. No one says you have to condone something that is clearly wrong. So there are differences, and there's, that's why there are these people studying this and teaching people how to know those differences and how to work through that. And I think that's incredibly important work. Because it literally changes the trajectory of your life, because it affects your health, your mental health, your decision making, and your relationships. So here are a few questions, and some of this comes right out of our book, The Brain Warrior's Way, and I think this is really important. How is my anger and my unwillingness to forgive someone else helping me? Believe it or not, sometimes, and this is really hard to acknowledge, there's a secondary gain. There are times where there's a secondary gain to you. If being a victim keeps you stuck and keeps other people feeling sorry for you or helping you, or it keeps you from having to do certain things in your life or face certain things, that's going to be really painful to face. So you just have to, but acknowledging it can help. But then also answer the follow-up question: how is this anger and unwillingness to forgive hurting me? Because more than likely there's a lot more pain associated with it than there is helping from that secondary gain. And really take time to think about that and fill it out. Really spend time on, how is it hurting me? And is there a good reason to hold on to these feelings? Is there a really good reason for you to continue it? So you might be justified, but that's when I want you to really think about what that doctor said. I know you're entitled to it, but for now, can you just put your entitlement aside? So if there's not a good reason to hold on to it, then think about that. And then what would happen if you decided to forgive? Would you fall apart? Would the sky fall? What would happen? What would happen if you decided to forgive? And I think a lot of us have examples of this. I forgave somebody that was really hard for me to forgive. And honestly, a miracle happened. I'm actually friends with that person today, which I never believed could happen. So, you open a space for a miracle to happen. And a miracle might not happen, but you don't know unless you actually open that place. And then I just always believe in flipping it. So this isn't true in every case. Okay, so stay with me here. I'm acknowledging that there are some things so heinous that this isn't always true. Crimes against children, things like that, I'm not including those. I'm talking about, normal relationship things that happen with people. Divorce, okay, things like that. I'm not talking about abusive, like truly abusive things. But let's just use divorce for a second. He's such a jerk. Okay, let's just take that and flip it. I'm such a jerk. I can give you a lot of examples of when I was a jerk going through my divorce. It was a horrible divorce. And when one person gets stuck, it just all of a sudden it begins this whole avalanche of things, and you begin both being a jerk. And I can give you examples, a lot of examples of when he was a jerk, but then I can give you just as many of when I was, if I'm really honest. So when I flip it, all of a sudden it's like, all right, yeah, that's true. So what? We're just going to stay stuck in this? And that just makes it easier for me to sort of move to that next step. And then if they don't deserve your forgiveness, do you? If they don't deserve your forgiveness, do you deserve it? Because guess what? When you refuse to forgive someone, you relive it. Normally you relive it. If you're normal, you tend to relive that injustice over and over and over and over in your head. And when you do that, you're more cruel to yourself than the person who did it once or twice or whatever. Even if they did it a dozen times, you're being more cruel because chances are you've relived it in your head 1,000 times, and your subconscious doesn't have a sense of humor. So you're just reliving that and keeping those stress hormones alive. So without disciplining yourself, you have actually done more harm and damage to yourself than the person who hurt you ever did. So if they don't deserve your forgiveness, do you deserve it? That's the question. Because who's being more cruel to you? So some of the benefits of forgiveness. If we know now what the problems are of not forgiving, so it's healing. It's actually feeling less pain. You actually feel less pain. So forgiveness is actually a natural painkiller. Your moods will improve. Depression, anxiety, self-esteem goes up, and relationships get better. And oh, by the way, you make better decisions.